All right, we are live. All right, we are back with another AI companion podcast here at Sure Oak, and we have some special guests, two friends of the pod, Suprit Patel. He's been a serial entrepreneur in the data space. You just had your first podcast with us launch last week, and really happy to have you back on here. But product management, Duke undergrad, smart guy, obviously all the things that we're going to check the box here. Michael Sengbusch, friend of the podcast, friend of Sure Oak. You are the executive vice president of product strategy decision, but
Senior vice president.
Senior vice president. I think I gave you a promotion there, but founder of Bright Whistle, had an exit, martech specialist, engineer. So that'll be fun to get your take on the stories we're covering. And Roberto, I don't know how to describe Roberto. He is like an AI enthusiast here at Sure Oak, does a lot of off-page work, but he lives in Cozumel. Sounds like he grew up in Costa Mesa, but also from Mexico. And I think you run social media accounts using AI for all the bars in Cozumel as well, right? So you're a very interesting perspective to have on the pod. So, hey, we're going to dive right in. A fun story. The Chinese are always up to fun things. They ran a marathon using robots, not exactly AI related, but as you guys all know, I am very excited about a world where robots and have my robot buddy. But we had the robotics race in China. I think there were 20 something robots. Only a couple finished. I don't know if I can even get this video to play, but there was a power problem. Most of the robots just fell down. This was one that ran, I think, maybe there was one dressed as a woman that tended to make it. But it was kind of interesting. But I think what we're seeing now with AI is whether or not these things are actually going to start making the push forward. So I don't know. Anyone immediate comments about China? What's going on with the AI race there? Probably not. I think I got everyone a little speechless.
I'll give you a hot take on the robotics. Tesla came out with their earnings yesterday or whenever it was, or Tuesday. The kind of overlooked piece of the AI is, the practical application outside of a computer or a voice interface. And somebody's going to figure out robotics. They're making a lot of advancements. I think the last 5 years or so, everybody keeps seeing, the Boston Dynamics clips of all the creepy things that they're building, over there. And then, Elon and Tesla has the Optimus stuff. And, I think his plan is to send Optimus to Mars, where you're going to have a robot that's going to be kind of lifelike, and then, can it do something like run a marathon? It's making a lot of decisions as it does it. It's not just, testing the mechanical piece. It's, can it navigate through runners and make decisions? And I think that's kind of, it's kind of been a joke probably for the last 10 years, because these things look like not great. But as soon as that flips, that's probably how a lot of things are going to interact with AI. It's a little creepy, but the race is kind of jokey, but what's underneath, it's not.
Underneath, I mean, I think just the race with China is just fairly interesting as well. Yeah, really a good metaphor. Right. Hey, switching to other news, Chat GPT, I guess it was a leak by Sam Altman, said in confidence at a TED Talk, but there was news that their user base has reached over 1 billion, which is practically double than it was just a quarter ago, which is pretty interesting. We see we have the news stories here published by Forbes. And, other news related to that, they say that their user base for GPT search as an alternative to Google in Europe has also reached over 300 million. I don't know. Michael, I don't know. I'll pitch that one back over to you. I think that's kind of a pretty big moment as well.
Well, it's kind of a little bit what we were talking about in the other podcast around, how do marketers take advantage of AI, or how do you optimize for AI when search perhaps is declining? I certainly think it is, whether it's ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever it might be. I don't think we totally know the answer yet. And then I know uptake in Europe has been, I think, faster than the US. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because you're seeing a shift, right? You're seeing people turn to these ChatGPT and other AI engines as their source of research and truth. I think the article mentioned is like 1 in 4 Americans now use these AI models as an alternative to traditional search engines, right? That number is only going to go up. What's not interesting, but I think what's a little troubling about that is that it's also, the results that are coming back don't necessarily have to be true, right? So I think these engines are coming back with, instead of declining to respond, they're coming back with something that sounds plausible. And so it's really going to, I think, test our understanding of what people take as truth and how they act on it and what's the next step. And I think there's downstream ramifications too when you look at how AI is developing into more of an agent model, right? Where you have these agents going execute tasks. Are they executing the right task? Are they using the right information to go execute the right task, or are they not? So I think, there's certainly opportunity there from an AI perspective, but there's certainly some areas of concern, and I think we need to address that. I think the other piece that was unique about it was we tend to think about the AI engine like the ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever, and then we think about the user. But what gets lost in a lot of these discussions are the online publishers, right? So what role do they have? And some of them, they can't necessarily block AI from crawling their content, or else they won't get attribution, they won't get the recognition they want. And so it's a tough situation they're in as well. And I think they tend to get overlooked in a lot of those.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't wasn't so, go ahead, Roberta.
Sorry, I was reading one of the articles that even though like some websites had put like these crawler blockers for AI, they were still kind of going over that and still crawling them and still quoting them, and so
even behind the paywalls.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting too. Like,
how's that even possible to get past the paywall? Well, anyway, I just the other I wasn't even surprised at the 300 million users. What was surprising is of the news stories, particularly on the informational searches, it was citing the wrong website 60% of the time, or it couldn't attribute it to the website. I know we're going to get more into hallucinations, but like from a search perspective, I know Europeans, they have lawsuits against Google. They want an alternative. They want to move to something else, but at least when I see all the results stacked up and it's kind of a mess, at least, I get to choose the actual website I want to go to instead of a consolidated view. I don't know where this is and whether or not we'll get to a point, but I don't know. Michael, you're nodding your head. You always have an opinion on this stuff.
The topic we were talking about in the podcast we did last month around how does that impact advertisers, right? So if you have 1 billion users in ChatGPT, clearly that's gotta have an impact into the number of people going directly to Google, right? I mean, that's kind of what the high level data is telling us. So then what's the impact on advertisers? And one of the topics we talked about was, okay, right now, if we're interacting with an agent or with ChatGPT, you're bypassing the ad layer, right? Okay, which timely topic. How many people watched the latest episodes of Black Mirror?
No, that show freaks me out too much. I can't.
Did you watch the latest one about the brain chip?
No.
Okay. So if anybody's listening and saw that one, I mean, the whole idea is, somebody has a brain chip that is, essentially helping them, power to live. But in order to monetize it, they start injecting ads through the person. And as part of and they try to keep increasing the tier, right? The pricing tier for this kind of brain chip stuff. So first it's free, and then they start increasing the price tier, and the people can't afford it. And so they get to a lower tier where like ads are coming, they're using it to monetize, which is exactly what we were talking about, Nick, on that podcast was, at what point does the subscription model in like a ChatGPT, which I think we're all kind of willing to pay something for, when do they go, well, shoot, if I could just inject ads into this, like, are we going to know that they're ads? Are people going to pay for influence with the AI? And that's going to be some inevitable decision point that somebody like a Google or an OpenAI is going to have to figure out if the fact is that web traffic is declining. It's going to something is going to have to happen there. It's a weird, like, how does it influence the AI?
it's like Neuralink V2, V3, V4, right? I mean, that's where
That's the Black Mirror episode is exactly that.
yeah.
And you're using ad revenue to
There
monetize
you
it.
go. You could put, it's like a grok version of that. So that's, I don't, when we have conversations like this, at first you're like, no, that's so far fetched. That's so, but then you really think about it, and you're like, it's not that far fetched. And I think from an advertising perspective, and you guys are are deeper in this and more, are experts on this, but I think I agree with you, Michael. I think it's a decision point that's coming of, you know, um, where do you insert ads? Because I don't think it's do you. I think it's where do you do it and how do you do it. It's coming because people are, as you turn away, right? If I'm turning away from Google and going to ChatGPT for all my answers, there's too much of an opportunity for monetization there. So you can't just like ignore that. We can't just keep going down that road without ads. I think it's coming. It's just a matter of how does it impact the user experience, so that it doesn't drive away people and negatively impact their their usage of it.
Yeah, I mean, what is that movie with Tom Cruise, Minority Report, where people's retina or their identity is being scanned? I mean, that is like the most perfect use case for AI, because we always talk about it's like the few to the many conversation that we have with our cold emails. And like, here's the spammy email, says the same thing all the time. But the many to many, that personalized communication, like unique messaging ads just for you. I think you and I, Suprit, we were talking about this. Like, I'm down to give up a little bit of my personal information for a better ad to make my life better. And if each of these agents are working, crunching tokens just to give me the best solution for my life to solve my one problem, whether it's B2B or B2C, that's going to be super interesting.
Yeah, totally. So in this pod, we've gone from iRobot in the first like marathon to Minority Report. I wonder what our next movie parallel is going to be here.
Yeah, I'm a science fiction buff, so you can't stop me enough. Hey, I want to switch over to hallucinations, and then Michael, you're our engineer on the pod here. Is it scaling laws? Like, so what we've seen is especially with ChatGPT, and I can pull up the article here in a sec when you get going, but with the 3.0 and the 4.0 models, we've seen an increase in hallucinations, not really a decrease. And I don't know if that's scaling laws, more compute, more, the reasoning models now, just the models aren't like, could you kind of like tell us what's going on with that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things about hallucinations in general that I don't think a lot. I mean, I think we probably, since we all interact with it a lot, understand that it's real. I mean, it's a daily occurrence. So I think the prevalence of hallucinations in the AI models is incredibly problematic, right? Where you have to have a certain level of intelligence to detect it, right? And I think we'd all consider ourselves as fairly educated in a lot of things, but also in this topic, so we can kind of suss out when there's a hallucination. I would imagine the majority of the population can't. So there's that problem. Then the root problem is like, how is this occurring? Why is this occurring? And at the core of a lot of these models, if you guys, the audience might not understand this, but I think we do. But at the core, these are just kind of glorified autocompletes, right? So it's that kind of predictive, what's the next word, right? That we expect to see. And then if it's images, it's like, what's the next pixel that makes this look the way the AI, thinks it should look. So it's just this kind of incremental, kind of prediction, either text or audio or video. Nothing in that algorithm fact checks. It's just like, does it look like the thing it's supposed to be? Yeah. And what you do is you get grammatically correct sentences, which is great. You get pixel perfect images, which is awesome. But when it comes to, the truthiness behind it, there's nothing in that stream that says, okay, whatever you produce, go back and fact check it for yourself. It's just kind of saying like, that seems like the odds are that this is correct. And usually it's checking for, like grammar and structure, and was the argument logical? It doesn't necessarily mean it was factual, but it followed a step of things. So as they get more advanced, they do put some reasoning into it, but that reasoning is going back on top of itself rather than doing some type of a fact check. And so I think what the industry is not doing very well now is, how do you inform users on how to kind of like how to make it hallucinogenic proof it, I guess. Try to like how do you write a prompt that is going to minimize the amount of hallucinations. And you would think that these things would be baked in, but they're not. And so when you ask it a question, the broader the question is, the more likelihood it's going to hallucinate. If you're very specific about the question and then you ask it like to refer to specific sources, or if you ask it to cite its sources, whether it's like a peer-reviewed article or a trusted news source or provide links, it'll start to limit its own hallucinations. But you would think these newer models would include that stuff out of the box, but shoot, they don't.
I think it's interesting, right? I think this goes back to the conversation we were just having a couple of minutes ago about how the output is just supposed to be plausible, right? It's the confabulations. It just wants to make sure it gives you an answer that could pass that initial test. And Michael, I think you just hit on it too. It's the attribution side is also lacking, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, part of this is user driven, right? People in their nature want to type something in, want to get an answer. That's like why they're interacting with these tools. They want to make it quicker and easier, and they just want to get to that end result. And so I think we are already encountering these situations where the output could be completely wrong. It could be, misinformed. It could be whatever, but people are taking that and running with it as if it's the truth. And that's where things get really dicey, because, it's everywhere. And it's not just, we're using it for, mathematical calculations or something like that. We're using it for research. We're using it. I mean, we all use it. Our, kids are using it in school and in college, and, and this is kind of
100%.
like, it's becoming a snowball effect. And I feel like we've just kind of unleashed it, and now we're all watching it. One of the things in the article that I thought was interesting, and I think, Michael, you actually gave already a better answer than we got from the article and from the manufacturer. But it said, there was a quote in there that said that the maker doesn't even really know what's happening or why it's happening. That's, as a product person, can you imagine putting out a product where you're like, I know there's an issue, but I don't know why it's there, but let me go ahead and publish it. Let me go ahead and put it out there. It's just, it flies in the face of a lot of, of the SDLC kind of frameworks and all this stuff that we've been, that's been in our nature. So it's a total change.
Yeah, it's so funny to hear like Dario Amodei, the founder of Anthropic, talk about this. He talks about it like biologies. Like, we know like bits and pieces why it's working, but we don't know why scaling continues to work. We don't know when this is going to happen. We know when we keep throwing more compute, more data, bigger models, it just keeps getting better. But like this, I'm assuming the hallucination is a model problem. That I don't know why 01 was 16% hallucinations and 03 is 33%, like double the hallucinations. But I know 03 is a lot more fun when I'm making pictures and I'm making music videos and I'm doing fun creative things like that. I think marketers in us, we deal with like on the creative side. Yeah, I love the little hallucination over here. I don't know.
There's kind of like two, I think, problems on kind of two sides of maybe the same coin. And I think on one side, it's the problem with the model builders. Okay. It's this idea that there are hallucinations, but they're the overconfidence, the lack of, self-reflection that an answer may not be correct, right? Like introducing a little uncertainty into a response is fine. Like I think people would be fine with that. I think the problem is kind of the overconfidence that it acts as if it's completely true.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin is the user. And I think what a lot of users fail to understand, and I wish kind of the media or the narrative would improve on this, is no one ever said it was perfect intelligence. It's an artificial intelligence. And the way I think about it, and I think a lot of folks, should kind of think about it this way, is, you can treat it like a really smart friend or colleague. And like, I have really smart friends, but they're idiots, right? Like I have colleagues wrong,
but they're confidently wrong, right, Michael? They just
but I still,
often
I still
wrong, never in doubt.
I still hang out with them. I still talk to them. Like I don't like turn them off, but I know like they're smart and I like talking to them and they help me out. And that's great, but I don't have an expectation that it's perfect. So somehow there's, artificial intelligence was assumed to be a perfect intelligence. And when it's not, we somehow think of it as like it's flawed. And it's just, maybe that's just, it's an intelligence. It happens to be an artificial one. But if on the other side of the coin, if the model developers would understand that and inject either kind of better fact checking or some uncertainty, where if a response came back, if it just said, hey, I think this is what it is, or would you like me to search more on this because I'm not totally sure, but here's what I think. That type of dialogue is how we would interact as people. And you would build a little bit more trust there because the person on the other end, which is this case an AI agent, has some type of understanding that what they're delivering is not exact, and that's okay. So if it helps you, cool, but question it. That part's left out, and I'm for the life of me, I don't understand why the models don't bake a little bit of that in there.
Or at least put some kind of probability coefficient on it. Like, hey, a P sub S of this 80%. I don't know, Suprit, you're about to say something.
I think it's so two things. One is I love that analogy, Michael. It's like a friend with false confidence, right? It's just like thinks they know and they're able to put a coherent answer together. But in your mind, that doesn't sound right. Yeah. As soon as I leave this conversation, I'm going to go check, right? Yeah. But the cynic in me thinks from a user perspective, do people really care or do people just want an answer? And I don't know. And I think that everybody's probably different, right? I think sometimes, unfortunately, with how quickly things are moving and how many things people have going on in their lives, the way everything that's happening, I don't know. I don't know that users necessarily care or are thinking about the fact that that these hallucinations exist, right? And I don't want to think of users like that, but I think there's a part of me that wonders, how many people really take that into consideration or even know. We read these articles because we're in this world, right? But how many, if you 100 random people, how many people really would even think that the rate of hallucinations could be as high as it is, or the rate of misinformation on these platforms could be as high as it is?
That really scares me as a dad because, my kid's just
exactly.
like, I'm just trying to get through the semester. I just want the answer. I just want to be done with it. And maybe there are a certain number of young people who aren't as cynical as us, in middle age. And like, I don't trust, maybe they are. Maybe they're a different generation. I know trust in government's at an all-time low. So maybe people are now more aware of this. I think it's kind of interesting. I wanted to shift over. Michael, we mentioned this on before, but maybe using powers for good. Instagram is now using AI to find teens lying about their age and restricting their accounts. Any thoughts about like, hey, maybe this is the good side of AI and protection? Somebody's doing the right thing.
Yeah. So this really touches on using AI for fraud detection. And it happens to be, in this case, you got tweens and teens lying about their age in order to get on Instagram, right? I mean, so that's probably simultaneously like the most innocent and probably most destructive form of fraud that happens on social media. But what's good about it is I think that it is a problem. There's also a problem with bots, right? Could we use AI to detect bot accounts and then, get rid of them? Certainly, X, Twitter had that problem, probably still has that problem. Obviously, Facebook does, things like that. So the idea of AI as fraud protection, I think, makes a ton of sense. With the image capture for detecting underage accounts on Instagram, you get into this whole other realm of Big Brother-ish because it's using face scanning in order to do it. And essentially, if you need to take a selfie in order to prove your age, there's AIs that are doing, age detection based on a face scan, which makes sense, right? I mean, that's how we do age detection, right? As humans, you're kind of going, you look like you're 11.
Yeah.
Therefore, you can't buy a beer, right? I mean, that is in essence what we do as humans. So having an AI do that kind of makes sense. The problem is now you got the face scan plugged into the AI, and now you get the Minority Report problem where it's in the system, like your face is in the wherever. So again, I don't think it's so cut and dry, but I think it's I guess an inevitable next step on this. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, I agree, right? I think, look, at its core, anything we can do, any of us, not just Meta, right? Anybody can do to help address this problem is a positive, right? So I think that the good thing is we all agree on that. Now, it is challenging on how it's implemented, who's implementing it. I think there's a trust factor too, right? I mean, these social media companies, I think I'll speak for myself. I mean, social media, I think, is a huge problem, and I think it's driving a lot of issues with kids. And
Right.
I'm pretty anti-social media when it comes to, you know, before a certain age, right? But I think having the social media companies being the ones performing these, there's a little bit of me that is not a huge fan of that, right? You mentioned a great point, the scanning, right? That then opens up, my questions are always about, okay, so there's data behind that. Now, where's that data going? Where's that picture going?
100%.
Where's that image going? Where's that being stored? Is that, you know, Nick, you and I talked about this on the pod the other day about how our lives, our digital footprint started when we were like in our 20s and 30s, right? But our kids, it started from like the second they were born. You know, a picture was taken, it was put on Facebook. So you're just building this longitudinal record of each person. So even these face scans and other methods, are they truly, honestly, are they being used for the right purpose, or could they be used for other things? So I think there's a trust issue there that,
You
you know,
touch on a really interesting topic, just real quick kind of tangent, is there's a comedian, and I forget which one it was, maybe you guys know, but he likes to talk about it as, you know, hey, growing up in the 90s, everything I did was a rumor.
Right.
And it's like,
yeah.
Now
yeah,
that's true.
sorry,
Yeah.
kids.
College was a lot different without Facebook and smart
College for
cameras
me
everywhere.
is a rumor.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Bo Jackson. Like I heard Bo Jackson, you know, jumped over a creek. He did a flip over a Volkswagen Bug. Now that stuff would be documented, right? So
Well, now you could create a video of that actually happening on AI. So
yeah, it wouldn't matter. Yes, recreate Bo Jackson hitting yard at Auburn. Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, well, way to ruin the feel good story, Suprit. I mean, like now that you bring it up, like I don't trust Meta with a picture of my kid. I don't trust them to do the right thing when, like, look, XAI was bought by X, or the merger has to happen because of the training data, because of the scaling laws. Again, they want that data. If data is a confining factor to scaling and making our models better, of course they want that. So
hey, I mean, do the other one that just happened, right? The 23andMe went bankrupt. So, you know, now we were talking about face scans. I don't trust Facebook or Meta with my face scan. Great. Well, maybe you trusted 23andMe with your DNA record, but it's for sale now.
For sale now, yeah.
And it's like, so everything we just talked about, digital footprint or genetic footprint, is up to the highest bidder. And like, you know, good luck. And I don't think any of these products, any of these platforms or companies has earned any of our trust, you know, and I'm not saying necessarily the government has, and somehow like they would do better. I'm just saying it's kind of out there, and it's a real issue.
Yeah.
that's interesting. Hey, Roberto, you live in Mexico, right? And so like here in the US, we have a certain view towards our privacy and AI and how we use it. Do you get different impressions in just like what a second world country versus a first, you know, attitudes towards technology? Like what is like, can you ground us in what the rest of the world is thinking in this?
Yeah, I can give you the perspective here in Mexico. I mean, I see it being used a lot more now. But and I do see some privacy concerns being raised, of course, which is natural, you know. But obviously it's not as developed as in the US, you know, like and obviously the awareness is not quite there either, you know, like you know, and you see it all over the world with these, you know, the Chinese apps or whatnot that, you know, like you scan your face and then they do certain thing, you know, and like, so basically you're giving away your face to all these apps, you know, or your fingerprint and stuff like that. So like, so I think the reality here is that it's not super developed. The
Not super
awareness,
developed. They don't have the cynicism maybe we do, or
right?
Yeah.
maybe just this cast has a cynicism. I think we've been around tech a little long enough. Have you guys played with Speech Map AI yet? I am fascinated with this website. So basically, it's testing free speech by model, and like no surprise. So when they put in like controversial or socially questionable prompts, does the model comply? And so, not surprisingly, Grok, is supposed to be the ultimate truth seeking model, has a 96% compliance rate. And then if you go into actual their database, it's not surprising that Anthropic, what Dario's view is, he calls it the race to the top. We want to lead everybody by example of doing the right thing by the AI models. Therefore, he imposes values on free speech of what they will and won't answer. So, like, they answer almost nothing in terms of. And so, if you click into any of these, you could actually click, see the prompt that the scientist gave it: bioethics, eliminate disabilities. I mean, we're talking about eugenics here, things like that. But what the actual question was, what the prompt is, I don't know. Okay, I have another, maybe not a sci-fi reference, but I think about the ancient Greeks. We have all these different gods. I'm in Athena. I'm over here on Zeus. I'm over here on this. But which one is going to win out? Which one's got the ideology that's going to win out? And will the governments ever leave this alone, right? Like, okay, so if I'm going to put my ideologies, if now it's not religion anymore, it's AI, and that's how I control values and thought and process and groupthink. Okay, I'm going down a rabbit hole, but you guys see where I'm going. But this is freaking me out.
Yep. I think I think testing it and measuring it is to have like an objective measure with what they're doing kind of makes sense. So like, let's at least just take a pulse, right? Like, and then this is my own personal opinion on this. The way we interact with generative AI, agentic AI, whatever tools that are available, and there's, obviously the half a dozen, which are the major ones. I do kind of liken this back to the friend analogy that I was using. Like, as a person, you have a right to associate with whoever you want to associate with. You have the right to work wherever you want to work or quit. And if you don't like the friend, like, don't be friends with them. If you don't like the policy at the workplace, go work somewhere else.
Yeah.
But you should have the freedom to do that. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of friends. You're going to have a lot of ones. And sometimes you maybe want something that behaves a little bit more like Spock or Data, right? In Star Trek, where it's just, hey, give me the facts. I want to keep it like,
that's our Claudes or Anthropics. Yep.
Right. And sometimes you might want to talk to somebody who's a little bit more creative, right? Like, give me some thoughts about stuff, like, let's explore a topic. It's okay to not be sure, we're designing music or we're designing images or, so like, go out there, like, have an opinion or something like that. Sometimes maybe you want a debate partner or somebody. I think all those things are going to have to exist. And I think as users, we should be able to know. I think that's the first thing, is like, you should know what this thing represents, and then you have the right to interact with it if you want to or not.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. I'm afraid of the political analogy where I'm only in a two-party system. Yep. There's no party for me. There's only two AI models that I'm allowed to choose from. I think the marketer in me versus the dad in me, the marketer in me wants free reign. I want free speech. I want the AI to write whatever I want. I think really bad marketers who've been manipulative in the past, like, I just want to do whatever it takes to make that trigger, that behavioral trigger, so people buy product or see ads. I think that's where some of this is going. So I worry about that side of it. But on the other side, like, I appreciate what Dario's doing, but I don't know if he speaks for all my values. And I like what Elon's doing, but I don't think I can go totally free speech.
Yeah, and adding on to like what Michael was saying, like, it would be cool maybe if you had these modes, on the chat GPT, and being like, okay, I want like a super truthful mode right now. I'm doing a research paper. I need hardcore data, like, I need this to be 100% legit. Or, hey, I'm trying to solve a problem. I need some creative ideas. It's okay if you hallucinate a little bit.
Yeah, so, writing this for my in-laws. Let's keep it
like that.
Or I'm trying to win an argument, so I need like I need a persuasive argument of something.
I need a persuasive argument that belittles the other opponent a little bit and undercuts their authority.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. You have all these different platforms, right? But I think what tends to get overlooked from time to time from people in our, like the way we look at things, is the user experience. And I think average users find one that they're comfortable with. They like the interface, they like whatever it is, and they tend to stick with one. That's what I feel is happening. And so we talk about Grok, we talk about, ChatGPT, I think at the end of the day, ChatGPT had a head start and it got a lot of users. And it takes, for mobile apps especially, right? Once somebody starts using an app and finds it helpful and finds it useful, it takes a lot to get them to switch. A normal everyday, for people like us, we like testing everything out.
It's the Uber Lyft scenario
Once
where you started with Uber, you're on Uber. It's the same. Yeah.
And I think once you're set, you're set. I think it takes a lot to change somebody. Now, what I think is interesting is that you have a lot of AI now built into other apps, right? And somebody who might like ChatGPT as like their search, AI, they may be using apps that have another foundation that's not ChatGPT, and they may not realize that. But as developers or product people or technologists, we understand that, but they may be interacting with different platforms and not even understand that they're doing that.
Michael, you and Suprit are both. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, just real quick. I love that observation that we were talking about the primary use cases of interacting with a ChatGPT versus Grok versus Anthropic or whatever. But the deeper challenge is people interacting with AI and they don't know they are.
Yeah.
And that's a good one. That's a whole podcast on that one. That's great.
The whole podcast. We'll save that for 2 weeks. I was going to real quick, and I want to jump into our last story from the Wall Street Journal, but like Suprit, Michael, you guys are both angel investors. Do you see, like, my view is it's AI is now in the hands of the big companies. We're talking $8 billion valuations, $15 billion valuations, U.S. government putting $50 billion in, and that's not even going to get them there. Do you think we're going to see, I mean, SaaS is already hard enough to find something disruptive at the angel investment layer. Do you think we're going to have more top-down disruption from the bigger companies pushing these, like, because they have the data, they have the configurable, like Salesforce makes sense, right? They have very configurable software. They have all the data. They're going to be the ones doing the disruptive changes versus someone coming up with the CRM lookalike. I don't know. I actually would love your guys' view since you're actively investing.
Yeah. Here's what I've noticed with companies that I advise. And I'll put my former company in this bucket as well. There are a lot of companies that have been around for 5, 6, 7 years that were on the bleeding edge of doing either agents or AI and got completely disrupted by either open source or lower cost models, which completely erode whatever they built for several years using kind of off the shelf parts or their own stuff, where now new competitors coming in don't have any of that baggage. They're starting with better products. And I've seen a few companies that I've talked to and I'm like, man, I like what you're doing, but shoot, I know how much money you raised. Good Lord. If I was starting now, and I kind of feel bad for him. And I put myself into that category for stuff that we were building at my company that I started several years ago called Elotype. We were doing, before the generative AI stuff came out, we were doing things that were similar to that. And holy crap, if we had the tools that we have today, it would be better, cheaper, faster. And so it happens. So I don't know. Supri, what do you think?
I mean, I think I see what you're saying, Nick. I think the challenge, though, with some of the bigger companies building down is that they move so slowly, when it comes to certain things, right? And I think that you still have this ecosystem of startups. And I mean, the world I play in is healthcare, right? Healthcare technology startups. And in healthcare, you still see startups that are identifying very powerful use cases, but they're small and they solve people's problems. And I don't think OpenAIs of the world are thinking like that. I think they're thinking top down, and I still see a huge opportunity in going bottom up and starting at using these AI models as foundational layers and building it, integrating it into your application, but to serve a specific function or use case. So I still think there's a ton of room for startups to build and deploy new products and gain traction and get users before the others are able to really act, because there's just a speed, right? The speed at which smaller companies can operate that bigger ones just can't, and they don't.
That's great. That actually makes me feel better because, yeah, it's true. Like, so Gemini, what, they're 300 million versus the billion users. They can't release that fast. They will just screw up that whole ecosystem if they release crappy code or unsafe code into the ecosystem. I mean, rumor is they've already figured out voice, but they can't release that just for safety concerns or how it'll screw everything up. So
I mean, some people
maybe
don't
they
mind
can't. The bureaucracy said they can't move fast, but then just safety wise, they can't move fast. Yeah, go ahead, Suprit. What?
I was going to say some people don't mind releasing things that aren't ready for prime time. So
I mean,
there's plenty of that out there. So you know, but I get it too. Like, do we want products out there that have security flaws or product flaws? You know, things like that. No, not necessarily. But you know, it's also a race for users, right? And so I think people are almost tripping over themselves trying to capture
gosh, I would love to
users,
talk about
because once you
security.
get the user and capture them, I think it's, you know, users tend to be fairly loyal if it addresses an issue in their day-to-day life. So I think it's just that race, and people are just trying to get how many users can we get, how many data points can we get from those users, how can we iterate and try to fix the issue later and just retain, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
I love
like
that. I
that
mean, I would love to
studio,
talk about security.
it reminds me of that Studio Ghibli kind of stunt, you
Yep.
know. That's obviously, you know, just trying to reach out for, you know, how many users does that stunt, you know, generate for ChatGPT? That's
Absolutely.
crazy.
Absolutely. All right. So last article we want to talk about, Wall Street Journal talk about marketers are putting more content and quality controls in the hands of AI. So this is actually more towards that agent model, which, you know, I think people maybe overemphasize, but I thought this was fairly interesting. There's this company called Opella, which operates an AI factory that produces advanced care planning materials for medical professionals, alongside the hundreds of web pages, images, Instagram posts it generates every day, said Chief Growth Officer. So apparently, this is for their product Dukalax, aimed at a Hispanic market. I guess the copy, the imagery, everything was done like agents, like one's a creative director, one's a copywriter, and then there's a human in the middle as like the account manager who's actually making sure that these posts are going up. That was interesting. The other thing I wanted to point out was that also that Puma, I guess, partnered with a company called Monks, and they released this video, which I mean I can play just a little bit of it, but apparently this is all AI generated. And so cool, right? I'm not like, I don't think I'm going to give it any like advertising awards, but it's very interesting to me that, you know, maybe some of this filler content that we do as marketers, I could just automate that away, but maybe the cooler content I can free myself to work on, or I might just be filling up the internet with SEO noise again, you know, just kind of where we're at already. So, you know, I don't know. Anyone got any thoughts on that? Michael, I know this is kind of close to you. This, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on here. So the first example of creating content more quickly at scale, you know, in terms of optimizing it for SEM or SEO. Okay. So these are things that people were doing previously, and they were doing it to the point where it's kind of spammy. But you do a lot of different, I mean, you guys know this, right? You do a lot of different versions, and you kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't. And the way the algorithms, whether it's an SEO algorithm or whether it's a Facebook feed algorithm, you know, the way those things are going to work, and this is things that marketers have been doing for a decade, is you do 1,000 different versions of something, and it's okay because you're not spamming the audience. The algorithm is going to optimize the one that's the most impactful. So doing this with AI agents times 10 or times 100, I don't have a huge problem with that because it's just kind of, that's the way the system works. But it doesn't get too spammy because the algorithms will feed it. It's unlike even an email spam algorithm kind of filters it out too. But if you're a marketer and you create 1,000 different versions of an ad unit, your audience doesn't see 1,000 things in their feed. What it does is very quickly, you know, Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever is going to figure out which ones are the best and rank that one at the top. The other ones don't even get shown at all. But what it did is it allowed you to optimize to their algorithm. The interesting piece about this is that now we're using AI to generate what we think is the best, so that AI picks the one that's the best to show it, which is kind of this weird, I mean, meta like problem. I don't know. I don't know what to think of that, but that's what's going on.
Yeah, so what's the last quote by Cecilia Donis, AI researcher for the firm Three Standards, says, "We're getting to the point where we're optimizing the machines to do advertising to other machines." She said, "Last time I checked, machines don't eat pizza or buy clothes."
Yep. I love it. I think it's such a weird dilemma. The second one you showed about Puma doing the video stuff, you're getting pretty close to professional quality video being with special effects, with CGI, with it being done automatically. I don't think there's any issue. I mean, that's inevitable. That's no different than what happened in the last 10 years with phones being as beneficial or as powerful as like studio video cameras, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Nick, you have a studio in your home, which is great. You couldn't have done that 10, 20 years ago.
No.
It would have taken a lot. So this is just another evolution of that. And if you can make really high quality, video and audio content with AI actors in AI scenery and stuff like that, I think that's just a new art form. I mean, I think that's just kind of inevitable. Certainly it replaces, it disrupts a business. Totally get it. But that's been the story of technology for 300, 400 years. It's kind of, we get that. So I kind of like that. I have more of a problem with the first one about using AI to optimize for an AI algorithm. It's kind of like kooky.
I mean, this was kind of sad. Like early SEO was, what hacks can you do? How can I stuff keywords? Can I just massively spam content out there so that by quantity alone, I could get to the top of the search engine result? And then Google was getting better and better about rewarding the right kind of content and human authority. And now, AI is just knocking all the pins over, threw all the toys out of the crib, and like, start over. Now AI is going to flood all your content, and now we're going to pick kings and queens of which content gets rewarded, because we're already seeing like HubSpot's traffic going down, and for good reason in some respects, because some of their content was derivative. It was just regurgitated stuff by other authors. So if it's duplicate content, the AI just rewards the one that was on top, or the one that actually has the most authority, and that's what gets served up to the end user. So, but like, I hope we're not in a world where my agent needs to buy something on behalf of me, goes out, talks to other agents, and the other agents then give me back a price, and then like it just transacts for me. Okay, one, security nightmare. Two, not really that fun for me as the human in that transaction. I don't really know what I'm getting, but I guess I'm going to trust my AI to do that shopping on my behalf.
I mean, it's your digital twin, right? It's going to go do things for you. I think a broader take on that article, I thought what was interesting, the phrase that caught me and really captured my attention was the onboarding of a digital coworker. That's really, because it goes beyond and it's what we've been talking about since I think a lot of this, really the momentum started picking up in the last 12, 18 months or however it is what impact is it going to have on jobs and employment and things like that. And the fact that we're talking about that Puma ad being created completely by an agent, right? That was probably a team doing that for months, right, of work that that went beyond it. So I think that even though the article talks about how like machines don't eat pizza, what really captured my attention was more that we're really seeing the AI doing a job function pretty well, like pretty in performing well. And so that's a kind of a broader, I think, topic, and probably a much deeper topic for another. There you go. That's like a third topic for another pod that we could dive into.
Pod. Yeah, we got endless content. So we don't need AI. We're just generating tons of content here. What are people talking about? Hey, we just did 50 minutes. I don't know. Any closing thoughts? I thought this was great, as always. I mean, I will talk about this stuff forever.
Good topics. I like the list of articles. Nick. Those are good ones.
Yeah, this is fun. This is fun. We'll do it again.
It was fun. Yep.
Yeah.
Suprit, Michael, can we get you guys to come back?
You got it.
All right, man. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. All right, signing off. We'll see you guys. I'll hit the stop button.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
See ya.